Welcome to the Woodstock Theological Center's podcast reflection series. This week's video podcast features Senior Research Fellow Dolores Leckey speaking during a Woodstock forum entitled The Future of the Church at St. Joseph's University. Here, she describes the role of the laity during the Second Vatican Council and how this pertains to the future of the Catholic Church.
When you get to the third session, there was to be a discussion on the document on the laity, the decree on the laity. People were very excited there was to be a decree on the laity. And I would say that there were forces at work in Rome, in the Curia, to try to block that, along with religious liberty, along with the document of Catholic relations with the Jews, along with Gaudium et Spes, along with a lot of documents that we all live by today. There was a distinct effort to block that. But God does have her ways, and the Spirit was at work in this. It's interesting to read the day books of the council and hear what bishops were saying about the draft of the document on the laity that was given to the bishops to look at. The bishops rejected the draft. They said it was A, clerical, B, no layperson had been consulted until the 0 hour, and that was unconscionable. And thirdly, there was not a prominent place for the theology of baptism and confirmation, which in fact is the basis for what can be called the true lay vocation. Everybody has that, huh? That's part of what it is for the universal call to holiness. What distinguishes any of us as a Christian is not ordination, right? It's our baptism. It's the great leveler. And so it was rejected. One bishop got up and he said, I'll tell you what my problem is. I went to the dictionary last night and I looked up laity and it said, see clergy. And he said, and that's the problem. Okay, that's the problem. And there were others who got up and who said, I am ready to reorganize my diocese, and I want the laity to have this role in governance. And when you read through all of this, you're absolutely exhausted by the time you get to the end of it. These are elaborate plans for how to reorganize the church in Algeria so that you're meeting in the desert like every week, It was just completely, but they were getting excited about how are we going to have a more egalitarian way of doing this. Anyway, the document was written and it was passed, and here are some of the major points in it. One is that lay life is a true vocation called by God to live in the world of work, the world of family, civic society. It's a true vocation. We used to only think about religious life and priesthood and marriage as a true vocation. Freedom is a word that's seen throughout, and that's the influence of Cardinal Sunin's. You cannot hem in the Holy Spirit. Freedom is what counts. Spirituality appears in that document perhaps for the first time. Spirituality was not a Catholic term. Again, if you were looking for spirituality, you were drawn to see moral theology. Friendship is identified as important in lay life, and in all of the lay movements that have developed since then, friendship is really at the height of it. Implementation, my second category of hope. Let me just say that when the United States bishops came back, they would determine they were going to make these documents live. And so they reorganized. First step was to reorganize the headquarters of the Catholic Church. And they noticed that what was really absent was a secretariat for the laity. And so I came in as the founding director of that. I can tell you truthfully, there was not even a paper clip in the office, so we were really starting from scratch. One of the major accomplishments of the first years of that secretariat was to staff the committee of bishops who wrote the first pastoral document on the laity since the council. And it is called and Gifted. 4 points they made. One is that the laity are adults and they ought to be treated as adults. Secondly, there is the universal call to holiness, and their spirituality and holiness is as vital as anybody else's. Third, that everyone, by reason of baptism, is called to ministry of some kind, ministry in the world and in the secular sphere, and ministry within the church. They clearly define two arenas for the working out of ministry. And lastly, that the laity are called to community, and they can show us how to live community. They ended that document with these words: "We have spoken in order to listen." Right? Haven't heard much of that since, huh? We have written in order to listen, and we now await the first word. And that was my job, was to arrange dialogues so that bishops and laity could be talking with each other about this. And that was some of the most exciting time, really, that I ever spent. So why spend this little piece of time on that kind of history? Because I think it shows that once upon a time, there were ordained leaders who underwent major conversions, which let them trust the gifts of the laity, both during the council and during the period of implementation. So what about today? I mean, what can I say, excuse me, in terms of hopes to bring back that spirit? That spirit is still underway. The Holy Spirit doesn't go away somewhere. Holy Spirit is still with us, and there is a dynamism. And the metaphor that I find most useful to discuss this, the current situation and the future, is the threshold. You know, every building has a threshold. And when you think about a threshold, what comes to you? Well, it is the strongest part of the building, is it not? It's where you go when there's an earthquake. Well, we've had an earthquake in the Catholic Church. We had the sex abuse scandals. We had the ignoring of one of the greatest blights on our history. And what happened? Laity kind of congregated around a threshold, and clergy came with them. And out of the kind of destructiveness that was there, some new life emerged. And I want to just mention two post-earthquake organizations. One is the Voice of the Faithful. The Voice of the Faithful were lay people who had said, this can't go on. And they really gained strength when some pastors joined them. You had 50 or 52 pastors in Boston who signed on with them. And then you saw, again, that icon of the people of God together saying there is something wrong, let's fix it. The second organization to come out of that was the Leadership Roundtable for Church Management. These are very gifted people from the world of business and industry and other places who said, you know, church has a big management problem. They really don't know how to do it. And so together, they've been helping to bring that about. Those are two still existing organizations. And I always thought the strength of Voice of the Faithful was that its purpose was very clear. The second thing that has happened at the threshold is a point of entrance. And so we have a whole new way of ministering. There are 85% of all ministers in parishes are laity, women mostly. You take all those people were to disappear tomorrow, things would start to close down. 85% in all the parishes. Right? What is happening with that? This point of entrance, these lay ministers are formed not in seminaries. They may get some of their courses from seminaries, but they're not formed there. They are formed in life, in the secular arena, in domesticity, in the way it is to live in relationships, the way it is to give and take, the way it is to listen to another point of view, and they bring that culture into the culture of the sanctuary. And likewise, they receive from the culture of the sanctuary the magnificent tradition of the church. You put all of that together, that's a very exciting possibility. And then the third, I would say the third point is that there is something called theology from below that is happening. People are learning and have learned how to really They've learned how to reflect theologically on their experience.
Thank you for tuning in to the Woodstock Reflection Series. For more information, visit us online at woodstock.georgetown.edu.